Ora, estamos então aqui ao vivo para a ligação prometida. Hoje é a primeira ligação do Admira Livre Podcast em inglês, internacional, e estamos em direto com Russel Bentley, ele que vive em Donetsk. Welcome everybody, this is the first live stream of Admira Livre Podcast in English. And we are very pleased to have our guest here directly from Donetsk. He has a very, according to my opinion, a very peculiar story to tell. And for the sake of Russel, good evening and welcome, first of all.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast, bro.
I would like to start to refer to the past a little bit, just because it might be some new audience that you will be introduced to, and so can you tell me just a little bit about you and how did you end up in Donetsk before we start?
Well, I was born in Texas in 1960, the city of Austin, Texas. It's kind of a progressive island in a sea of arch conservatism in Texas. I grew up there in the 1960s and 70s during the Vietnam War, during the civil rights movement, stuff like that. I was always kind of the black sheep of the family, and I started reading books by Che Guevara and Ho Chi Minh in my early teens, and just kind of went from there. I was very disturbed by things that the United States was doing around the world throughout my life, particularly the murder of Muammar Gaddafi and the destruction of Libya in 2011. And then I saw the Maidan start in 2014, and I knew exactly that it was another coup d'etat, another color revolution, regime change. And I got really upset by the war crimes that the Ukrainian army was doing against the people in the East that were standing up against the puppet government that the U.S. installed, the genuine Nazi government. And it's not in any way a exaggeration or rhetoric or something to call them Nazis. I mean, they have swastika tattoos. They wear swastika uniforms. They say Heil Hitler, and Slava Bandera, who was a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator during the Second World War. And they used the same techniques that the German Nazis used here during the Second World War. I mean, so they're genuine Nazis. The people in the East and in Crimea stood up against it, and Crimea became part of Russia again. The people of Donbass were defending themselves pretty much on their own, and I felt sorry for them because they were facing, the second or third most powerful army in Europe, and they were, and the entire arsenal of the Ukrainian army, from everything from ballistic missiles to airstrikes to artillery, down to snipers, down to gangs of people beating people to death in the streets and everything in between. So I came here in December of 2014, joined the Army, served for about a year in the DPR, Donetsk People's Republic Army, in combat in very, very hot positions, frontline positions. And then I started doing information warfare, counter-propaganda, and humanitarian aid here. It's been 8 years that I've been here in Donetsk now. I'm married. I have a house here, and I love it here, and I plan to live here the rest of my life. I have a DPR passport and a Russian passport now, so this is my home, and I'm continuing to defend it however I need to, and glad to do so.
Yes, you've told a lot. I already went through some of the questions I had here for you. Yeah, so you said you fought on the DPR side, and you have a DPR passport. Can you describe a little bit what was life for civilians in Donetsk in the past 8 years? Or is it because it's very confusing and sometimes misleading on the Western media? and we almost don't get any reports. It's like the war only started on the 24th of February. So can you tell a little bit about that?
Well, it's complete propaganda and disinformation technique that the West is using. That a lot of uninformed, or to be honest, ignorant people that think that this war started 3 months ago. No, it has been a full-fledged war with the full power of the Ukrainian army used against the people of Donbass, the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, about 4 million people in total, for 8 years. And like I said, everything from aircraft to artillery. Our city has been shelled very heavily in the last 8 months, but it has been shelled, in the last 3 months, but it's been shelled, continuously for the last 8 years, so it's been very tough here. On the other hand, the quality of life here is better than it is in the part of Ukraine that's underneath Zelensky and the U.S. And NATO installed Nazi regime. We have plenty of food. The prices are stable. There's plenty of work to do. Our defense forces have been highly effective in holding the lines for the last 8 years in the static positions. But what happened was in February of 2022, the Ukrainians, under U.S. and NATO direction, had planned to begin a major military offensive against the Donbass republics. The front line, the combat line between Ukraine and our two republics is about 200 miles long, about 250 kilometers long. And the Ukrainians had amassed a force of over 150,000 soldiers along this 200-mile front. They had heavy artillery, tanks, everything, extra fuel, extra ammo, and the Russians knew they had exactly the exact plans and the exact date for when they were going to be bringing a massive offensive. And the thing that people don't understand is that the four main cities of the Donbass republics, which is Donetsk, where I live. It's a city of about 1 million people. There's Makiivka, which is about 500,000, Gorlovka, which is about 300,000, and Lugansk, which is the capital of the Lugansk People's Republic, which is, I don't know, maybe 75,000 people. But the front line is literally on the city limits of these cities. From where I sit right now in the center of Donetsk, it's 10 or 12 kilometers to the combat positions of the Ukrainian army. And it's been that way for this whole 8 years. In fact, my wife and I have a small house in Petrovsky district, which is about 5 kilometers from the front line. And we now are staying in the center of the city because Petrovsky district is heavily shelled on a daily basis. The water is basically non-existent. Electricity and internet and stuff like that is very sketchy. So, we've moved to the center of the city, where things are a little bit more reliable, shall we say. But the thing is, it's, even in the center of the city, it's, 10 or 12 kilometers. And so the Ukrainians planned to make a massive assault directly into the center of these cities, thereby creating a urban warfare situation and using the population of these cities, the civilian populations, as human shields, just like they ended up doing in Mariupol, just like they're doing in Severodonetsk right now, but, which would have neutralized the power, the military advantages that Russia has, which is their artillery, their air force, and their rocket force.
Mm-hmm.
And so, thanks to God and Vladimir Putin, the Russians came in less than a week before the planned beginning of that attack by the Ukrainian army. And so they stopped that attack. And it would have been, because as we see in Mariupol, where the Russians came in, the city was, heavily damaged. Maybe 30 or 40% of the housing there is no longer even habitable. But as soon as Russians took control of that city, and I've been there and I've seen it with my own eyes, they started bringing in, hundreds of tons of human aid, food, water, medicine, repair to the electricity, repair to the water. That's not what the Ukrainian army was going to do. They were literally going to come in here like the German Nazis did in the Second World War. And as soon as the first wave of combat troops came through, they were going to send in these Nazi battalions and the National Guard, which are basically, hired war criminals. And they were going to be like the German Einsatzgruppen from the Second World War, which were basically, death squads. And they were going to just come in and start slaughtering the people here. And it is only because of the salvation from the Russian military operation that prevented that. That prevented literally genocide and the massacre of, scores or hundreds of thousands of people here.
Yes, there is a Portuguese journalist currently in Donetsk. He's the only Portuguese journalist there. He's an independent freelancer, but he managed to sell a piece to Portuguese CNN, and and he gives account of the shelling in civilian areas, but it has very low visibility, I must say. It's not on, but at least it is something. And in what way, in these recent days, the shelling has increased? How many fold can you describe? And do they look for any specific targets? Are they shelling?
Yes.
Okay.
I can tell you that recently, like say in the last 2 or 3 weeks, the shelling of the center of Donetsk, civilian targets, has increased. I think maybe 3 days ago, in one day, there were over 300 ballistic missiles and heavy artillery shells, 152, 155 artillery shells. In these 155s, which are provided by NATO to the Ukrainian Nazi war criminals, are the 152s that they had before from the Soviet army. One shell will blow a hole in a parking lot that you can park, 2 cars in. I'll put it that way. If it hits a house, the whole house is gone. If it hits an apartment building, it'll blow three stories off that apartment.
Do you
off
think?
that apartment building.
Do you think? Just sorry to interrupt. Just to get it clear, do you think it could be misfiring in any way,
No.
or?
No, it's absolutely impossible. But I'll tell you why, bro. Because on May, on May the 30th, which is traditionally the last day of school for Russian schools, the schools here in Donetsk, at 12:30 in the afternoon at lunchtime, which is traditionally when they have on the last day of school, they have a celebration called Last Bell. And it's where, the whole family comes, the students, everybody's dressed up in their best clothes. They bring flowers to the teachers. They have like songs and dances and read poems and give awards and all this stuff. And at 12:30 at 12:30 in the afternoon on the 30th of May, 3 schools got hit simultaneously.
Shit.
With heavy 152 artillery, 155, and it was. And the ceremonies had been canceled specifically because of the danger of shelling, but the Ukrops didn't know that. The Ukrainian army didn't know that, and they shelled thinking that there were going to be hundreds of people at these 3 different schools, and they hit them with pinpoint accuracy. I just finished writing an article about it recently, and I can even send you some pictures. But I mean, they literally hit like the front door of one school, a separate school. There was an assembly area behind the school, and they hit the center of that. You know, the third was the gymnasium, or like a special science academy, and again, they hit right on the front door. I mean, so there's no question. I mean, when you hit three schools all at the same time, right on the front door, you know, it wasn't like, oh, it was 100 meters away. I mean, it was literally on the front door. You know, I mean, so in three schools at the same time, you know, there's no chance that that's random. And I'll tell you something else. A week later, June 6th, they hit 6 schools in one attack. And I can send you, I can send you the map of it.
Yes.
And in this one attack in central Donetsk, 6 schools were hit, you know, in less than an hour. You know, so there's zero chance that they're, and they do randomly shell the civilian areas. Yes, they do. But these attacks, these 2 specific attacks I'm telling you about, were definitely targeted and intentional terrorist attacks by the U.S.-backed Nazi Ukrainian army. And there's been plenty of outdoor markets. They have markets here in Donetsk, like they have in Europe and like in Mexico and stuff, you know, where it's not like a big grocery store. It's just a big area, and everybody has stalls, and they sell fruit or clothes or whatever. And several, like, you know, a dozen of those markets, you know, which are huge markets that are always packed with people, have been hit. There's, you know, in my house in Petrovsky district, there's 4 markets within maybe 3 kilometers of my house. Markets that my wife and I shop at, you know, on a daily basis, you know, that have been directly hit, targeted as well. And there's no military around. I mean, it's just civilian areas. These are terrorist attacks by the U.S.-backed Ukrainian army.
Russell, I've noticed that the front lines have been changing since the Russian intervention in the 24th of February. But one line I see unchanged. It's the Donetsk front line. Do you have any assessment on why that is? Because is the Russian army unable to press forward and
Well, first of all, the Russians are winning this war. They're going to win this war. The chance of Ukraine defeating or even pushing back the Russian army is exactly 0. Russia has come in here. It's using between 10 and 15% of its military power in this operation. It's not, Russia is coming in here with kid gloves. They haven't, bombed Kiev like a lot of people think they should have. I mean, if you recall when the United States attacked Iraq on the phony excuse about the weapons of mass destruction, which was a lie, and they knew it was a lie. But you recall...
They razed the city.
Yeah, the city of Baghdad was blown to the ground. And Kiev has hardly been hit at all. Only military targets, warehouses, and training and bases have been hit around Kiev so far. The main parts of the civilian center has not yet been touched. And it's the same thing in most of the major cities. We're not going in carpet bombing, trying to do terrorist bombings to break the will of the people, anything like that. It's an anti-Nazi, it's denazification and demilitarization operation. And again, I say that to say denazification, there's genuine Heil Hitler Nazis that run the Ukrainian military and political structures, and we're there to take them out because they're doing the exact same war crimes that the German Nazis did. The deal about the front line along Donetsk, which, again, these main cities that I mentioned before, with the exception of Lugansk, which has, the front line has been pushed back there, but the main cities in Donetsk, Gorlovka, to Donetsk, that's maybe 25, 30 kilometers, something like that. And that front has remained static because it's been the front line there for 8 years, and it's been heavily, heavily fortified by the Ukrainian army. And there's no need for a frontal assault, which would basically be suicide because, it would, to attack there, it would the casualties would be, 5 or 10 to 1 on our side to make a frontal attack. What we're doing is we're coming around behind them. Once an army gets surrounded, then they have the choice of either being surrendered or destroyed. They can't escape. They can't retreat. They can't get reinforcements.
Yes.
So, Russia is taking a very slow and careful approach to minimize death on both sides, as well as destruction of civilian infrastructure, because all the areas that Russia liberates are now going to be its responsibilities, So, every building that they blow up, Russia is going to have to rebuild. Every, pipeline,
infrastructure,
electric,
yes.
all that gets destroyed, Russia's going to have to rebuild. Every person on either side, every Ukrainian soldier that they kill has somebody somewhere, a family or something, that's going to be against Russia just because they killed him, even if Russia had the right to do it, against a murdering war criminal or something. So the less deaths, it will be easier to pacify and work with the population after our victory, which is, again, and I tell you, the propaganda from the West is incredible. It is astounding in its audacity and mendacity. It is exactly the opposite of the truth, what people in the West are being told. And I mean that literally. I wrote an article recently as well about this particular subject, and I have photographic proof. There was on the 15th of May, the 13th of May, there was an attack by the Ukrainian army with a Tochka-U ballistic missile. This is a heavy duty. It's the most powerful conventional missile in the Ukrainian arsenal. It carries a 1,000-pound warhead. The missile that they shot at the center of Donetsk on May 13th was a anti-personnel cluster bombs, which are actually prohibited by the laws of warfare, but it didn't stop the UCROPs from using it. And what they did, and this is the real exact story here, several days before this attack, Ukrainian military intelligence, secret services started creating fake accounts on Russian social media, like VKontakte, for example, which is like the Russian Facebook, something.
Yes, that's where we communicate.
Yes, and they started making these fake accounts saying that they were from the Donbass People's Republic government and military. And they said, if you're the wife or daughter or mother of a soldier who's in the DPR army and you want information on his status, on his paycheck or his, his whereabouts and if he's okay or not, come to the administration building on this day at 12:30 in the afternoon. And they even went so far as to do spoof text messages that were, again, falsely labeled as coming from the DPR military and administration, and it was sent out as text messages to telephones of women who were related to soldiers that were serving in the army. And I know this for a fact because I've seen one of them. A friend of mine who got wounded in the hospital I went to visit him, and this was a few days after the attack, and his daughter showed me on her phone the exact actual message. It said, "Come to the administration building on Monday at 12:30 and get information about your dad." Okay. Well, they fired this rocket at the administration building at 12:30. This was 1,000 pounds of cluster bomb munitions. It had the potential to kill hundreds of people. Our air defense forces shot and hit this missile as it was incoming. They deflected it, and only 2 of the 50 cassettes of cluster munitions actually detonated. And just those 2 killed 24 people, civilians driving down University Boulevard on a Monday afternoon. It was a heinous, absolutely diabolical war crime. And then, and you can look this up, bro, because this is from Spain. Or no, excuse me, it was Italy. The next day, and so 24 people were massacred.
Yes.
40 or 50 were wounded.
Yes.
And a photographer that was there in Donetsk, he took a photograph. It was a very evocative photograph. It showed multiple dead bodies in the street, a man with his face in his hands weeping over his dead wife. And the next day, an Italian newspaper called La Stampa published this photograph on their front page with the headline saying, "The Carnage." And then with little headline above it in red saying, "Russia continues to attack Ukraine."
Yes.
And you understand, it wasn't a mistake. They knew damn well where that photograph was from, which they stole from that photographer, by the way. They didn't say anything to him. They didn't ask his permission. They didn't pay him for it. They didn't even credit him for it. They just stole the photograph, and then they put it on their front page, implying that this was a Russian attack against Ukrainians. A week later, it was what, the 3rd? March. Yeah, it was in March.
Yes.
A week later, they shot another Tochka-U missile that landed in Petrovsky district, my neighborhood, hit the top of a 9-story apartment building. It blew about 1/3 of the top 3 stories of that building off. And the newspaper in the United States called the New York Post, again, the next day, puts this picture, a picture of this building in Donetsk, bombed by Ukrainian army, on their front page, and says, under the headline, "Russia continues to bomb Ukraine." This is not a mistake. This is an intentional lie. And it's what you call a black lie or a damn lie, because it is the opposite of the truth. And they know they're lying, and they know that they're lying. And everything that the Western media says is not just a difference of opinion. It's not just, a couple of degrees of perspective difference. It is the opposite of the truth. It is like a satanic lie.
Do you think because recently another 1 billion package of weapons and other types of aid has been approved to Ukraine?
40 billion. 40
that's
billion.
I think more than 40 billion in total, but the last, I'm just referring to the last package. About 968 million I've read on our press, on the Portuguese press today, and they even had a list of the equipment, the military equipment they were sending. They even referred to this IMAR system with missiles up to 80 kilometers range. Do you think this will give the capabilities to the Ukrainian army to change the course of the war?
There is no weapon, period, that NATO can give to the Ukrainian army that will change the outcome of this war, from the fact that Russia is going to take as much of Ukraine as it wants. Russia can defeat the Ukrainian army in Ukraine. Russia can defeat the Ukrainian army plus NATO armies in Ukraine. Russia can defeat NATO armies in Europe if it wants to or if it has to. And if we have to, we will. And that is not, that's not a brag or an exaggeration. That's a fact. The criminals that control the countries of the European Union and the United States, these are truly anti-human, satanic, what they're doing is really a depopulation program right now. And it's not a conspiracy theory. It's actual fact. You talk about the apocalypse, it was pestilence, which is sickness. It was famine, and it was war that they're going to do it with. And that's what's happening right now. They don't care who wins the war. All they're doing is trying to prolong the war as much as possible, to destroy as much as possible, and to kill as many people on both sides as possible. The outcome of this war was predetermined from the day that Russia got involved here militarily. There's no way, there's nothing. There's no weapon, no conventional weapon that NATO can give to Russia that can make any difference. First of all, at least half and probably 3/4 of all the money and weapons that the West has given to Ukraine is immediately diverted and stolen. It never even reaches the front. So
some of it goes to the black market, like this Javelin missiles.
And that is indisputably a fact. It's already been seen on the dark web. They're selling the Javelin anti-tank. They're selling the Stinger missiles, on websites, and they're already doing it, So, and everything from Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, down to NATO pistols, with ammunition. So first of all, most of it's being stolen and diverted, as all of the Western money that's come into Ukraine over the last 8 years has been. So, but even if all of the weaponry and all of the money that the West had given into Ukraine was directly put for real into the hands of the Ukrainian army, they still couldn't win. Russia is winning using less than 15% of its military power. It hasn't even used its most powerful weapons yet, much less, a significant, percentage of its soldiers, So
yes, please go on. I don't want to interrupt.
It's ridiculous. It is, again, it's a lie that's the exact opposite of the truth to say that Ukraine has any chance of winning. And they're just, NATO countries are throwing their old, obsolete weapons away in Ukraine, charging full price, of course, to, the debt of Ukraine, which is never going to be paid. So it's going to have to be paid by NATO countries' taxpayers. And they're just throwing away their garbage and, saying it's military aid. Most of it's being stolen. But even if it was all going to the Ukrainian army, there's no way. It'd be like Mexico trying to defeat the United States.
Yes, on a ground war. Yes.
Yeah.
One question I was very curious about one subject is have you met any of the prisoners that were captured and kept in the DPR by the DPR?
I met some in Volnovakha back in March. Not any of the Western mercenaries, but I did. I was there and watched the interrogation of 8 Ukrainian army prisoners.
How are they treated? How are they treated in the DPR?
Much better than they deserve. I can tell you that, bro. Of the 8 prisoners that I saw that were captured, one was from Azov Battalion. and one was from Pravi sector. These are both genuine war criminal Nazi units. Very apt to compare them to the Nazi SS and the German army in the Second World War. These are the shock troops. These are the the death squads, and and for them, they are very different from regular Ukrainian army soldiers, and a lot of them are war criminals. And in the DPR, we do have the death penalty under international law. Mercenaries who come from other countries to fight for money here are not considered prisoners of war, and they are not eligible for protection under the Geneva Convention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
3 of the ones that were captured here in the DPR, two Britons and a Moroccan, were recently tried for war crimes and sentenced to death. They have a month to appeal now, and their appeal is probably not going to be successful. They probably will be executed by firing squad.
Do you know about the situation of the Ukrainian troops in the Azot plant in Severodonetsk? Do you have you talked to anyone, or do you have information?
I haven't talked to anyone there. I follow the news very carefully in that area. It's basically a miniature version of what happened at the Azovstal plant in Mariupol. There's 300 or 400 or 500 soldiers hiding again in the underground catacombs of a large industrial factory. They have civilians there as human shields again, just like they did in Mariupol, and it's a repeat of the Mariupol situation, but I think it's going to come to a much swifter end than in Mariupol, and it's going to be the exact same. They're going to either, they have the choice to either surrender or die.
I follow this YouTube channel called the Military Summary Channel, and he's been providing very accurate analysis on the front line. And one of the informations he told on his last report was that like 20% or 25% of the forces held on this pocket on the Severodonetsk industrial area were foreigners, foreign volunteers or mercenaries. Mm-hmm. Do you think this will be a wave of death sentences, or this will comply the West, the countries where these people come from, to try to some negotiation to see if they are not sentenced to death, or do you think they just will abandon them?
Well, I mean, I don't think that there are going to be thousands of executions, although I think that, morally and legally, there is all the justification for there to be thousands of executions. Mm-hmm. I think that those who are convicted of specific and especially heinous war crimes will be executed, as they should be. As, mm-hmm. You understand that, the United States, has had the death penalty, for the last 50 years.
Yes.
And they put it to good use. So they have no reason to complain. These guys that came here, and even before the special operation, the kind of people that were coming here to join the Ukrainian army, they're really the scum of the earth. They were coming here, first of all, to be like on a safari, to hunt human beings. They were coming to join the powerful side of a very asymmetrical war, that was shooting at, civilians on a daily basis. They were coming here to kill, and I'll say this, and I came here to kill too. I came here to kill the kind of Nazis that we're talking about right here in 2014, when it was a very different war. But I didn't come here thinking that I was going to. I mean, I came here actually thinking that I would not live through the winter. When I got here in December of 2014, I did not expect to live till the spring. But I came anyway because I felt like it was it was a moral obligation that I had, to stand up, first of all, for what I knew was right and to fight against what was wrong, not just wrong, but, truly evil. And second of all, to show the world, even if it was only a few people, that all Americans, were not like the good Germans during the Third Reich, and I was very, very, very lucky. I mean, I served for about a year in the military here in the hottest times of the war up until this Operation C started.
You were part of an anti-tank squad, wasn't it?
Well, I did. I was an RPG gunner. I was also an anti-sniper, and I was also a regular rifleman. But, I served in frontline positions where there were firefights pretty much every day and every night.
I've seen the videos of you showing your previous positions where you had been on the front line, yes. You were quite lucky for what I've could see there.
Well, I mean, I served 3 years in the U.S. Army back in the 1980s, so I do have some military experience and skills, and it's, I'm not bragging when I say I'm a pretty tough guy, but, at the same time, it was absolutely luck because, I mean, in the first 6 months in the unit that I was in, it was a subunit of the Vostok Battalion. It was called Sudvremeny, which means essence of time. It's a communist unit. It was a very hardcore frontline unit. We ended up joining Spetsnaz Battalion after about 6 months on the front. And out of the 50 guys in that unit, in 6 months, 10 of them had been killed, and another more than 10 had been seriously wounded. So I was in a unit that had almost a 50% casualty rate, and and the guys that got killed and wounded, I never would say that I was a better soldier than them. I was just lucky. So really, that's what I can say is, I believe in God. I believe I had some guardian angel difference between life and death, and I was just always lucky.
Do you by the way you mentioned wounded and that how is the healthcare system in Donetsk? Because I believe that it had to be taking care of a lot of these cases coming from the front line. How is it prepared to endure that, to
yes,
to manage that? Yes,
particularly now, Russia has been very generous with their support as far as medical personnel and equipment and medicine and stuff like that. Not just for the army, but for the civilians on both sides. And I'll say this, that throughout the 8 years that I've lived here, it's the medical system here. It's completely free. Sometimes they have not been able to provide medicine for free, and so sometimes you have to buy the medicine yourself. But the hospital stay, the doctors, X-rays or MRIs or something like that, absolutely no cost. And the thing is, somebody that works as a doctor here in Donetsk, they make $400 or $500 a month.
okay.
And they're as good as any doctor anywhere in Europe or in the United States. And they know, hey, I could move to Kiev, or I could move to wherever, Barcelona.
Okay.
Lisbon.
Yes.
And make $500 before lunch every day.
Yeah. True.
So a lot of, I would say, and maybe, and it's hard not to say greedy, but you could say practical, because they have the choice. They can live in the harsh conditions of a war zone and be paid, basically pennies for what they're worth. So a lot of those people did leave. Has been a shortage of doctors,
Okay.
but the ones that stayed are the ones that, were doing it for the love of humanity and for, patriotic reasons and stuff like that. And the medical schools here are first class, and we've raised up a new generation of doctors over the last 8 years that are, very dedicated, very brave, and very, excellent doctors and stuff. So on the one hand, we've had a shortage of those who left for greener pastures, but on the other hand, the best of them all stayed here and are still here.
I wanted to know a little bit about the civilian everyday life in Donetsk. Like, for example, according to crime, does the war tension provoke any extra crime on the streets of Donetsk, or is it a safe place to live? What's the environment there, the social environment?
It's an incredibly safe place to live. Yeah, and although they say that Donetsk has been a tough city, which it is. But I can tell you this: I've never seen street crime here. I've never known anyone who had their house broken into or their car stolen. I have a car here. It's a 30-year-old Lada Niva,
Yes.
from the Soviet Union, and I generally don't even lock the doors of it. It would be, a very easy car to steal if somebody wanted to steal it. But I've never even had somebody go through and steal my stereo or something out of it.
Can civilians have weapons?
If yeah, I have weapons. I was allowed to register. First of all, everybody that served in the early years of the war generally had the opportunity to obtain extra weapons if they were so inclined. They call them trophies. You take them from the captured or dead Ukrainian soldiers. I have a pistol, a Makarov pistol, and a AK-74. And they had at one point, maybe I think must have been in 2019. There was a lot of unregistered weapons in the city, and so the government said, okay, we're going to have an amnesty period here. Everybody that has unregistered weapons can register them over the next 3 months, and then they'll be legally yours. And so I registered my weapons. For me, being a veteran, being someone that is on the Ukrainian hit squad list, I had a legitimate self-defense reason to have them. It's not like I was going to go rob liquor stores or something. But
can you tell me about I'm sorry, just to interrupt. There's a lot of things I want to know. Can you tell me about that hit list that you're in also?
Well, when I first got here, I came here, and as soon as I got the day that I got here, almost, I met this guy who was born in Russia, but in the year 1995, his family moved to the United States. And so basically most of his life he grew up in the United States. But he spoke fluent Russian. He was a Russian citizen as well as U.S. citizen. And when the war started, he came here. In fact, he was from my own hometown, Austin, Texas, as well. He had lived and grown up there, but I never met him until I got to Donetsk. And we volunteered together. We were in the same unit, Sud Vremeny. And at one point there was a spy, a traitor soldier in Vostok, who had been told that he would be paid 1,000,000 hryvnias, which is about 60,000 US dollars at the time, if he could capture and bring one of the Americans, which was me and or my buddy, to the Ukrainian side. And so he told my buddy. My buddy was back like at the barracks, during a rotation. I was at the front, and he told my friend that, hey, I know where there's a bunch of weapons trophies that we can go get and bring back to the commander here. And it was a bogus story, but my friend fell for it, and they drove through the night, and they're like, and this guy was getting ready to drive across the line to the Ukrainian lines when my buddy finally figured out what was going on. They were at the last DPR checkpoint, and my buddy said, "Hey, wait, hold on, this guy's a U-Crop," and they stopped him and they saved him. But and so then they took him back, and this spy was interrogated rather harshly, and he told the whole story about it. There's another site, a website that the Ukrainians have that they post personal information about people that they consider to be their enemies. I'm on it. A lot of journalists are on it. Anyone that's in the political or military administrations of the DPR or of Russia are certainly on it. There's been people who were on it who've been murdered for being on it, and so there's a death list there too.
Yes, because I've heard about that before, and I wanted to hear from you. Is there in the front line in Donetsk? Is it being secured purely by DPR forces, or are there Russians there now?
There are Russians on the front lines now, since the Operation Z started. Before that, and I'll say that even now, it's probably 90% or more local guys that are defending the front here, because we're the guys that have been defending it all along, and so we know the areas. We know we're the guys who built the
defenses,
the bunkers and stuff.
Yes.
We know where to look for snipers and stuff like that. I mean, you don't just put a new guy in a position and he can be the same as a guy that's been there for years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand. What about back in 2014? There was a lot of claims on the part of Ukrainians that the Russian army was invading then.
That was a complete lie. I mean, because just as we saw 3 months ago, when the Russian army invades, there's no question about it. Everybody knows all the way around the world immediately. And it's not, if the Russians had come in back then, which they didn't, and it's, and of course it's obvious, it's only logical, and nobody ever really said that, oh, the Russians aren't helping us. It's all only, the DPR people. I mean, yes, in 2014, in December, when I first joined the Army, I helped unload a whole train load of 82 millimeter mortar ammunition. And we worked all night, a whole bunch of us, and it was a lot of ammunition. Another day, we went to a huge warehouse, and we unloaded probably 100 Kamaz, 5-ton trucks full of Grad artillery rockets, and those didn't come from Santa Claus.
Yeah, yes,
but it was, but we could not have survived without them, So
yes,
it was
yes.
truly humanitarian aid, and I can say too that every battle that I've been in this war has been a defensive battle. We had our position, static defensive position. And, every afternoon around sunset, because the Ukrainians are always on the western side of the
Yes.
line. So they wait till the sun comes down and gets in our eyes, where the sun's shining at our positions, and
Yes.
they can
Yes.
see us better, and it's harder for us to see them. So they always come at sunset, start shooting, and then the battle goes on throughout the night or something like that. One time I went behind Ukraine. No, actually twice. I've been behind Ukrainian lines. Once was on a recon mission, and once was on a rescue mission. And in both of those times, I was very fortunate and we didn't have contact with the enemy, so there was no shooting while we were on their territory. But other than that, it's been only defensive battles that I've fought, that the DPR Army has fought for the last 8 years. And I mean, and yes, we have had, especially when I was in the Spetsnaz battalion, Han battalion, there were guys there, and they were, super, super fit. I mean, you could tell that they were, hyper soldiers, and they're, everybody in the Russian armies and DPR army, they all have a code name,
Yes.
like mine was Tejas.
Tejas, yes.
And,
Texas, yes.
Yeah, and there was these guys, and they all had the code name Instructor, and you could tell that they weren't from around anywhere close, and they, but they were instructors. They didn't go out, 10 of them at a time and go, attack a position or something like that.
Yes.
They didn't even really work very often on the front line, even singly or at all,
Yes.
But these were, this was advisors from the Russian army,
Yes.
So we did get ammunition. Yes, we did get some advisors and instructors. But we've basically defended our own homes and families for the last 8 years. And, there was never, up until the Operation Z, there was never organized Russian military units working on the territory of what was once Ukraine.
I was wondering about the political situation in the DPR. What do you think the DPR it's bound to join Russia, be annexed by Russia, or it will remain an independent, self-proclaimed independent republic?
Well, that's a question that's on a lot of people's minds these days, and I mean, and nobody really knows. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the DPR joining Russia. Actually, in Crimea back in 2014, there was a referendum, and people. I mean, it was like a vote. The population got to vote yes or no. In many ways, it would probably be advantageous for the DPR to become officially, legally a part of the Russian Federation. On the other hand, there's a certain percentage, perhaps a minority, of which I'm a member, that would like to see the DPR become, very closely aligned with Russia, but at the same time, somewhat independent,
Okay. Yes.
But I can't. I mean, I wouldn't want to predict because I don't have, enough information or knowledge about it to say how it's going to go. I don't think many people at this point do. But as it's been, I mean, the Donetsk People's Republic, it's not a worker's paradise. It's not been, a perfect place to live. There have been, significant issues with corruption and whatnot in the political and military spheres. But I mean, generally, it's better than any place that I ever lived. I've lived in the United States, Mexico, Germany, and I'd rather live here than anywhere else. You know,
So
I mean,
it's not in your future plans to go back to Texas.
well, if I go back to Texas or the United States, I'm going back with the Russian army to denazify them.
Do you think I'm going back and forward between political and military issues, but there's a lot on my mind. I was really looking forward to this conversation. So forgive me for that. But do you think that all this confrontation would be avoided after the first battles in 2014, 15, would be avoided if the Minsk agreement would have been fulfilled?
No, I mean, because the Ukrainian administration then, under Poroshenko, and also the guarantors, France and Germany, NATO members, they were not to be trusted at all back then. The idea has been, the plan has been, and it's been a United States plan that NATO is basically going along with, has been to make Ukraine into a NATO base on the border of Russia. Russia cannot and will not ever allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the Minsk agreement was just more diplomatic subterfuge, just that when they understood that they couldn't beat us militarily, they thought they could do it by trickery, diplomatically. And no, there was never, I mean, the operation, the denazification operation, was inevitable since the Maidan, as soon as the U.S. installed their puppet regime. And it was actually perfectly timed. A lot of people have been confused or even angry that it took 8 years for Russia to finally come in, but they don't understand all of the, all the details and the ramifications behind this war. The first of which is that Russia is very, very different today than it was, 8 years ago in 2014. This war, the military part of this war is only a very small fraction of the real war, which is the political and economic war, that is going to be the real Third World War, in which the economic war that is already underway probably will kill a lot more people than the military war in Ukraine will. In 2014, Russia was not really economically, militarily, or politically prepared, because you understand that whenever Russia decided to come into Ukraine from, any time over the last 8 years, they had to do it understanding that there was a very real possibility that they would have to fight NATO in Ukraine, whether Ukraine was a member of NATO or not. So they had to, I don't know if you've ever read The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's a great book, and I've read it many times, and I know Vladimir Putin's read it many times more than I have. But one of and it's the basic principles of military strategy. It was written 2,500 years ago. All of those principles that were written then still 100% apply. And one of the main principles is you don't fight a war unless you know you can win. And so Russia, before, in the early years, maybe they didn't know if their military was strong enough. They understood that, of course, there would be economic sanctions, and you understand that economic warfare is just military warfare in slow motion.
Yes.
Remember the famous, the sanctions that the Clinton regime put on Iraq.
Yes.
Before the the Iraq War, they killed 500,000 Iraqi children.
Yes.
And you remember the famously despicable reply of the Secretary of State, Madeleine
Yes.
Albright. She said, "Oh, it was worth it."
Yes. Yes, I remember
I
that.
mean,
Yes.
but 500,000 children from economic sanctions. I mean, and you know what? There's maybe been probably there's been less than 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed in this war so far. And so do the math. But so Russia, I mean, it was like a giant chess game, and Putin had all his pieces in place before he made his move. I mean, because over the last 8 years, the Russian economy has become independent, self-sufficient. They've got much stronger ties, both economically and politically, with China, who is the most important ally in the world for anybody else in the world. They've strengthened their military. The weapons that have been, upgraded and released in the last few years, they literally outclass anything that NATO has, by decades, by orders of magnitude. And the Russians aren't even having to use them yet. But it was the point that, like Sun Tzu said, Putin waited until he knew that he could win, that he was sure he could win before he came in. And it did. And it was my admiration for Vladimir Putin. He's, by far the greatest statesman in the world alive today, and one of the greatest in all of history for sure. But I mean, he waited till in historical, geopolitical terms, he waited until the very last second. It was within a window of a week, which in historical and geopolitical terms is a second.
Yes, a second. Yes.
And so he did it perfectly. And I'll tell you, a lot of people complain about how the Russian military campaign is going slowly or something like that.
Yes, I was going to ask about that in overall, the war in overall. Yes.
Well, again, you understand that the strategy of our enemy, which is the United States and NATO, is to cause as much destruction and death and hatred between Ukraine and Russia as possible, to besmirch the reputation of the Russian Federation throughout the world as a rogue state, dictatorship, all that stuff. So, of course, our counter strategy is to minimize that as much as possible.
Yes, you have published in recent days a quote from a commander of DPR army when he told about when he came to the realization that he had a choice to either the people or the infrastructure. Did I get it correct?
Yeah,
in Mariupol, and then he realized that he would have to make that choice over and over again.
Well,
yes.
I mean, if you recall the two wars in Chechnya in the 90s and in 2000, the city of Grozny was razed to the ground. And I was in Grozny about 3 years ago, and it's a world-class city, and it's been completely rebuilt. I mean, it's really stunningly beautiful city. Everything, of course, is, first quality. It's all modern. Everything's clean and just, it's a really great city. And we're going to do the same thing with Mariupol and whatever else gets damaged or destroyed, we can rebuild. We can't rebuild, the lives of soldiers on either side that are lost. So we're doing everything we can to minimize the death, even more so than protecting the infrastructure. And I'll say again, another quote from Sun Tzu from The Art of War, and it's the most important quote and point of that whole book. And he said that the greatest warrior is not the one who wins every battle. The most excellent warrior is the one who wins without fighting.
Yes, I know that quote, and
And
yes,
that's exactly what Putin's doing. I mean, he was forced, by the threat of genocide to come in. He would have liked to have done it, either peacefully as friends or to outmaneuver them diplomatically, but he had no choice but to come in and fight. So he's trying in every way he can to minimize the destruction. And go ahead.
Yes, in the early stages of this war, the Western media, particularly the CNN, I recall a news piece that were concerns of the U.S. that Kiev would fall within few days, and then after that everything changed, and then because everyone was imagining this. A Soviet 1944 style human wave style army rolling through Ukraine.
Or the U.S. shock and awe as they did in Iraq or in Afghanistan.
For example, yes. But and then things started to turn. That didn't turn out, and even the Russians abandoned the northern part of Ukraine, as you know. That was claimed as a great victory by the Ukrainian side. And then they were even saying that the Russian morale is low. They don't have many supplies. What do you think? Do you think the Russia? What happened on the northern Ukraine? Do you know any of that? Why? Yeah, tell me.
I've had some friends who were fighting there. And that are now back in Donetsk, and basically, it was a combination of things. It was first of all that a mistake on the part of the general staff of the Russian military. They thought that the Ukrainian people would be much more receptive to an operation to liberate them from under a foreign puppet government. They also, to a degree, underestimated the ferocity and the ruthlessness, the true brutality of the Western-trained Ukrainian special forces and Nazi battalions. But as far as like Kiev, yes, absolutely. There's, and there still is no question that if Russia decides to take Kiev, it can do so in a couple of weeks, with or without NATO, having any say at all in it.
Do you think that will be the goal of the Russian army, to go as far as Kiev, doing this, using this new tactic of grinding down the Ukrainian army?
I hope so, and I think so. I mean, and I really hope so. Because. In fact, there's been a lot of maps published that show the, the political and ethnic and language separation between Ukraine, between the West and the East, and the center is basically 50-50. The East, 95% Russian. The West, 95% Ukrainian. But, I think, and of course, the Dnieper River is it would be a very appropriate
frontier
way, like the Rio Grande River in Texas and Mexico, an appropriate military barrier, as well as, like landmark between the two or whatever.
Yes.
But really, I don't think that, the goal of the Russian operation is to denazify and demilitarize and to remove the threat to Russia of NATO weapons or, offensive weapons that could be aimed or used against the territory of the Russian Federation. And I don't think they can do that by just going to the Dnieper. I think that they can and should go at least as far as Kiev. And then if you look at a map and you draw a straight line from just northeast of Kiev, which is Belarusian border,
Yes.
and you draw a line down from there to the northern tip of Moldova.
Yes.
And I think if I think that would be perhaps not quite have the natural defense of the Dnieper, but I think that that's how far they need to go in order to prevent a resurgence of NATO or Ukrainian Nazis or whatever threatening the Russian Federation. So, and plus, I mean, the worst war criminals in this war are in Kiev, and there's a lot of them in the U.S. and British embassies, that really I hope, and this is an important point that, everybody's, again, if war is a game of chess, and everybody's saying, oh, the Russians have given up on Kiev and they're all going to concentrate on the Donbass front again, and you go back to Sun Tzu and he said, always do what is least expected.
Yes.
If I may, that, the U.S. and all the European countries at the beginning of the operation, they hauled their ass to Lvov. They moved their embassies to Lvov.
Yes.
In the first or second week. And now they've moved them back again.
Yes.
Because they don't expect Kiev to be liberated.
Yes, that's what I thought.
So if you follow the precepts of Sun Tzu and do what's least expected, they could wake up to a very hard surprise one night. I mean, in the morning, it's Russia made a no-fly zone, and they've blown up all the railroad tracks, and they're blowing up all the roads, and anybody that's moving, better go sit in the basement until the army gets here tomorrow. So I do think that they will take Kiev, and I think that they really have to, because we need to clean out Kiev, and then perhaps whatever the new name they'll be, because Ukraine will be split into two countries then. And what's in Western Ukraine, west of Kiev, it's just trash, man. It's Nazis and basically farmland, and it's really hardcore Nazis there. So there's, it would be like an Israeli Palestine or Northern Ireland type deal to go in and try and go all the way to the Polish border. It would be another Afghanistan. So we're going to take the part that supports us, and whatever part further than that we need to for our security, which I think is up to Kiev and the northern border of Moldova. And then that way, we have Belarus as a, like a barrier between, actual
like a
Ukraine.
buffer, like a buffer.
Yeah, as a buffer.
Yes.
And so I think that's what's going to happen. I think we'll end up taking Kiev. I think it'll be a big surprise for everybody in Kiev when we do, and I think that it really needs to happen.
Do you think if the Donbass fortifications fall, do you think that the rest of the front line will hold as long, and the war would go as costly as it is going now? Because it's, I believe, no matter who's winning, that it's a hard battle for all the reports that I can find from the front.
It is a hard battle, and you make a very good point there, because it's a real concern for the people like myself who live in Donetsk, 10 kilometers from the Ukrainian army, that as they get surrounded, they might decide, that, we have a third option besides death or surrender. We can try and break through the Donbass front lines and go into the cities and do what we originally planned to do, and, hide out among 1 million civilians and use them as human shields like that. And that is still, I wouldn't say it's a probability, but it's a very real possibility that has a lot of people here concerned. And, and I hope that And again, our best and toughest fighters are still holding that line, because they're defending their own homes and their own families. There's, if it's, 10 kilometers back to where your wife and kids are, you're not going to surrender and you're not going to run. You're not going to retreat.
Yes.
There's nowhere to retreat.
Okay.
So it is a possibility. It is something that I'm sure that the Russians have given, the appropriate consideration to and are watching very closely. I mean, one of the advantages that we have is that, the Russians, they have, their intelligence, military intelligence has completely penetrated, the entire Ukrainian political and military structure. We know, down like just like at the beginning of Operation Z, we know down to the hour what they're going to do, who's going to do it, and when they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if there, and there may be, some unorganized attempts to break through the Donbass line, but if there's no possibility that it will be like a full-on offensive that'll be organized between, multiple major military units, because Russia would know that beforehand and would stop it in its tracks.
Yes. How do you foresee, as we reaching the end of our conversation? How do you foresee? Do you foresee peace after all this ends, or is just going to be a kind of perpetual war?
It's going to be the end of the military war in Ukraine. The real war is the economic war that has now started. On which Russia has already won too. The United States and Europe are going to go through some very hellish times this year and in coming years. Their economies are going to crash. There's a very, very real threat. Actually, at this point, it seems as if it's becoming almost inevitable that there will be, not just a food crisis, as they're calling it, but a genuine famine where people in Europe and the United States die because they didn't have enough food to eat. And, again, in my opinion, this is being engineered intentionally by, the 1%, the parasite class that owns the U.S. and European governments, and it's being done intentionally to depopulate these areas, and that's what's going to happen. German government economists, have straight out said, by the end of this year, a loaf of bread is going to cost 10 euros. There's not going to be enough bread for everybody that's got 10 euros. And not many people will have 10 euros for a loaf of bread.
But the German industry, I don't recall the exact name of the person who said this, but he said it recently, and it's easy to look up. He said that blatantly that they cannot survive without the Russian gas, and so I was imagining a kind of peace and things quieting down in the mainstream news because people forget fast, and then business as usual. Do you imagine such
I would
a scenario?
be very happy to see that. I would be very happy to see that, but you understand that the people who own and control the governments of Europe, or well, let me put it this way. The people who own and control the U.S. government, and the U.S. government owns and controls the European governments to a very strong extent, and it can be seen already in so many different examples of how, the governments of the EU, both as the European Union as a whole and as the separate countries of the European Union, have made decisions that have been absolutely destructive to the welfare of the people of the European Union. And I think that until the people of Europe, I mean, literally stand up with like a French Revolution style opposition to these parasites and oligarchs that own their governments, they're just going to that things will just keep getting worse and worse for them. So
Yes.
the hope of the world is with Russia, and it's with the good people of Europe and the United States. If they can, and I guess there's really no other word than overthrow, the despots and the dictators that control their governments these days, then there's hope for humanity. And it's kind of a long shot because, in Europe and in the United States, more than 95% of the people, they're brainwashed zombies.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a way that I've often compared it. It's that, because they're, everything that they've consumed over the last 20 or 30 years has just it's been shit. And I hope it's not trouble to say a word like that
No.
on your show.
No, it's not. Definitely.
Okay.
My show.
This is the way
okay.
that I explain most people in the West.
Like
this.
By the way, my show is called Odmira Livre. Odmira is the name of a town and of the district council where I live, and Livre means free. So it means this podcast is not endorsed by any authority or any. It's completely, as long as YouTube and Facebook don't cut me out, I'm free to do what I please. That's what it means.
Well, this is the way I describe the majority of people in the West, in Europe and the United States. If you eat shit for long enough, you get used to it. And you say, oh, it's not so bad. But if you eat shit for too long, you start to like it. And then when somebody comes up and says to you, hey, man, don't eat shit. It's disgusting. It's bad for you. You're hurting yourself. And then they get offended. They get angry, and they're like, hey, it's good. I like it. You should eat some too. Get out of here. Quit telling me what to do. And that's the problem with most people in the West today. In the 90% range, is that they've eaten shit for too long and they learn to like it, and they don't want to hear somebody say, why are you eating a shit sandwich? They're like, no, it's good,
Yes,
and
I understand. I will ask you one more prediction from you, which is the fate of Volodymyr Zelensky. Do you think he will remain in power after all this ends? Because this will have to end at some point.
Well, it's been established that he's already stolen, just in his few years in office, over $1 billion, at least, in fact, $1.2 billion that he's already got offshore. He has a big mansion in Miami, in like a super private oligarch enclave. He's probably got a few other mansions elsewhere. He's got money, but he doesn't have political support. I think he's going to be, if he survives, which would be unfortunate, but if he does survive, he'll be like a pariah. He'll be left out in the cold. There's no big place for him or for Petro Poroshenko or Mikhail Saakashvili or Yatsenyuk or any of these, basically puppets or flunkies or henchmen that have been, the puppets of the U.S. in the Ukrainian, rump government over the last 8 years. So, and I don't think that any of these guys are going to live to old age. I think that, back in the Soviet Union, the KGB had a special department that went looking for guys that had it coming and gave it to them. And, and I have no information about that now, but I would be very surprised if something, bad didn't happen to him before they,
But
you know.
but I mean, do you think Zelensky is really in charge, or do you think is
No. Nobody has been in charge in Ukraine since 2014. I mean, when and you understand that for the first 4 years before Trump came in, Joe Biden was the president of Ukraine.
Yes.
And when he told Poroshenko to jump, Poroshenko didn't say how high. He jumped and he didn't come down until Biden told him to come down. Every single thing, all these guys is they're puppets. They're like servants, even slaves, you could call them. They're told what to say, and they're told that, if you don't do what we tell you to do, or if you do what we don't tell you to do, we're gonna feed you to the dogs.
Okay.
And and all these guys have replacements. There's nothing special or unique. They're not intelligent. They're not statesmen. They're puppets, and
Expendable.
they can easily be replaced.
Expendable, you mean?
Exactly.
Russell, is there any place on the internet where people can follow you and find you and read and hear from you?
Well, I've been very, very heavily censored.
I know.
Both going both ways. I mean, I used to get money from supporters from the West, by Western Union, PayPal, MoneyGram, stuff like that. That's absolutely all been shut down, cut off to the penny. I mean, so it's very difficult for me to get funds now from the West. I was kicked off of Twitter, deleted for life from Twitter back in 2016. PayPal in 2017.
YouTube as well. Your YouTube channel was very recently.
That I had for 12 years was shut down in March of this year. I made a 40-second video from the front in front of a bunch of Russian armored vehicles.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes,
and it went viral. I mean, it got millions of views in one day, and I mean, it was even featured on like American late night major TV channel programs and like that. I mean, it really went viral, and then that video was gone the next day, and my whole channel was gone the day after that.
Yes.
I mean, so, and you got to understand that, YouTube allows, or any other major, Twitter or Facebook. I was kicked off Facebook a couple of years ago. Again, no warning, no real reason. Just my channel was gone. I mean, and these corporations, these mass media corporations, they don't even have to give you a reason.
Yes.
I mean,
yes, it's not. The rules of democratic law do not apply to them because they are private companies and they have their own policies that they can apply.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I do still have. I have a Telegram channel. I have actually a couple of them, and Telegram. It's kind of like Twitter. It's worth it for people to make the effort to get on Telegram and on VKontakte, which VKontakte is like the Russian Facebook, but without censorship, and in fact it has a much higher quality of membership. There's 500 million people on it, and almost all of them are a lot smarter than the people on Facebook. I mean, you remember, I remember, and dude, and I got to tell you, and it's true, when I think about, the trolls and the idiots and just all, the censorship and just all the bullshit that I had to put up with on Facebook, I'm really, I kind of thank them for kicking me off now,
Yes, I know. I know that you're not, I've seen some of your posts on VKontakte, and I know that you don't take much BS on your thrown your way, and you deflect
Yeah,
you deflected immediately. I
but I
I've
mean,
seen
and
some.
and really, I mean, and there's a lot of people migrating. I mean, Facebook is down, I don't know, by 1 billion people from what it was a couple of years ago now. And there's a lot of people that are just tired of it, that know that it's really a surveillance operation and a mind control operation. And so, they're just getting rid of it, and a lot of people are happy when they do. And V-Contact is a real excellent alternative. I mean, it takes a little bit of work, but anything that's worth anything is going to
Takes
take a little
work.
bit of work.
Yes.
But what
Yes.
I do, I mean, I speak Russian not very well. I can read it not all that well. But once you get on V-Contact, whatever browser you use, like for instance, I use Firefox, and you can put an add-on on your browser that will translate, the whole news feed, the comments and everything, the links
Okay.
to English with like a couple of clicks.
Good to know.
So
I'm recent
yeah,
on V-Contact, and I sometimes I've learned the Cyrillic alphabet to trying to read small stuff, but
mhm.
sometimes I have to go to copy paste on the translator to.
Sure, and that's a huge pain, bro. But
Yeah.
so and I did that for a long time myself, and I mean, and I also used to like the Google Chrome browser. It has like a built-in translator on it. So if you use Chrome, or if you use Google, you can translate. That's built into it. But I mean, and I did the same thing as you. It's like, oh, this looks interesting. Copy and paste, and
Yes.
and that's a real pain in the ass. And then one day, one of my Russian buddies, I'm like, yeah, I use Chrome because it's got the translate function. And he looks at me and goes, dude, Firefox has it too. And I'm like, oh, and you just go, like on Firefox, you go to the add-ons, and there's one called Translate Web Pages,
Yes. Yes.
and you
I'll
add that on, and then it's right click again, and the whole thing's translated. So, and it's worth it, dude. The information that you get on VK, you can't get, and on the information you get on VK and Telegram is all the stuff that's censored that you can't get anywhere in the West, either from mainstream media or social media.
There is one last thing I want to talk about, which is a journalist that I know that you know. She's called. Her name is Alina Lip.
Yes.
And she recently published a video that she's being prosecuted by the German government. Do you know anything about this?
Yes. I've worked with Alina for several months. She is an excellent journalist. She's a great friend of mine. She's a real comrade, and she's a real patriot, not just of Russia and the DPR. She's also a real patriot of Germany. She has a Russian father and a German mother, so she's got dual citizenship there. Plus, she's got citizenship of the DPR, and she's a young woman that I really like very much and admire, and she's the kind of person that gives me hope for the future of humanity, because she's she's a hardworking, brave, real information warrior, and she's not in it to become famous or make money. She's in it to make the world a better place, and she's very, very good at her job. And yes, just the other day, she got an email that she printed out from the German government. They've actually seized her bank account with 1,600 euros in it. They stole that money. It's not frozen. They took the money from her bank account. And I've heard, but I am not sure, that perhaps her father, who now lives in Russia, had a bank account in Germany that was also, the money was stolen by the German government.
Her father.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, and they're threatening her with 3 years in prison. And, and this is really, it's going back very close to, the Third Reich. It's going back to what was going on in Germany 90 years ago. I mean, to send somebody to prison for saying that, the Ukrainians are committing war crimes when it's true. I mean, if she was here, if she was lying like the Western media was lying and saying that, I don't know if she was saying the exact opposite of the truth as the Western media does on a daily basis, then, that could be a basis for some kind of criminal responsibility, but when all she's doing is telling the truth, for that to be illegal, dude, that only proves that the criminals are the ones that are making the laws and prosecuting the people who are telling the truth.
Yes.
And she's very brave. She's very dedicated. She's also really extremely talented and intelligent. She speaks English, German, Russian fluently. And so she's a great person. So, of course, she's also the kind of person that, the parasite class is really, seriously scared of, and they're going to try and censor. That's the simple way to do it. You look at who's getting really censored and who's getting allowed to keep going, and who's, and I really think that in the coming year or so, a lot of people that have been allowed to keep going are going to be stopped, so, it's going to be only harder and harder to get the truth out, which is why, people now, if they're really interested in, first of all, understanding what's going on, but more importantly, and this is why I think that I've been censored so hard, is not because that I reported the truth, but because I reported the truth and I put it in context and I said, and you know what? You should do something about this. My main thing
you are inciting
is that, okay, now you know the truth.
Okay.
So there's no need to sit around and make a comment on Facebook or, tell your friends about it. Do something about it, because what the Western Nazi oligarch parasite 1%ers, what they're doing to Ukraine, they're going to do to Europe. They're going to do to the people of the United States too, because they see us as subhumans. They're genuine Nazis, not just in the way they dress and act and talk, but in the way they think. And they see us, we're like a chicken or a cow or something. And as long as we're profitable to them, then, just like with a cow, they'll take care of it, they'll feed it until the day they say, all right, we'll now go into the slaughterhouse.
Yes.
But when we start becoming inconvenient or unprofitable, then they don't look at us as livestock anymore. They look at us as insects, as pests, And when, they don't look at us as a cow anymore, they look at us like a fly in the kitchen, And you don't think about the feelings of a fly that's in your kitchen. You're just like, well, this is my kitchen. I don't want him in here, so let's bump him off as quick as we can.
I have been receiving some comments here in Portuguese, and one of them says that the day before yesterday, Biden was already blaming. He writes Zelensky because of the Z things. And do you think that there is a lot of talk on the alt media? When I say the alt media, I can refer names like the Duran, like Gonzalo Lira, like Scott Ritter sometimes, and they say that the West now is trying to find an off ramp to this and basically slowly but steadily abandon Ukraine to its fate.
Of course.
Do you think this?
Of course.
This
it's Ukraine has always been nothing but a tool for the West to use to threaten or attack Russia. It hasn't worked out as well as they'd hoped. It's not. you remember at first, right after the Maidan, Victoria Nuland was bragging to some organization. She said, "Yeah, we spent $5 billion on Ukraine getting the Maidan done." And when that happened, they thought, "Hey, we just bought a whole country. Actually, the biggest country in Europe, geographically speaking. We just bought a whole country for $5 billion. That's a great deal."
Yes.
But since then, they've put in hundreds of billions more, and really for nothing. The Russian military and diplomatic services have checkmated them in every move that they've made, and they understand now at this point that Russia is not going to fail to secure its strategic interests. It can and will take as much of Ukraine as it feels it needs to, whether anybody likes it or not. So yes, they are definitely, throwing Ukraine to the dogs, kicking them to the curb, under the bus, whatever you call it, like that. That's definitely what's going on now. And these are ruthless bastards. They they don't care about anyone but themselves. They have absolutely no principles except all for me and none for anybody else. And so, Zelensky and himself and Ukraine are also making that transition from being a cow to being a fly.
Shit. Shit. Okay, Russell, we go now with almost 2 hours. Not that I don't like to. I have been enjoying the conversation immensely. I hope we will have future opportunities to do this again and to throw some updates and discuss the general situation, because I think it's important. I think it's very important. I discussed this with a lot of friends of mine here in Portugal. It's always a heated debate. Sometimes we get angry at each other, also in the political sphere. But I think for me the most important is to hear all the sides of the story all the time, so you are able to think for yourself and do not follow one side blindly. You have to evaluate, especially when you are far away from where things are happening. So undoubtedly this was a pleasure for me. I thank you very much again for accepting the invitation, because you didn't. This is a small channel compared to other channels where
That's okay. I like your work. I appreciate what you're doing. It's not about how big you are. It's about how much truth you can tell, and you're doing a great job. So I'm glad to be on. I appreciate being on. Be happy to be on with you again anytime you want. And hopefully we won't have to talk for 2 hours now, but
no, I don't mind. I've made shows for 4 hours long, so I really don't have any problem with time, and I don't have to go to work today, so it's okay. I'm an industry worker, but I'm off today, so
cool.
it's okay.
Well, let's keep up the good work. Let's keep in touch.
Yes.
Send me the links whenever you upload this, and I'll definitely spread it around. I appreciate your...
We've been live. It's already uploaded. I will download it, not to lose it. Of course, I have a backup on Rumble, because it's the first time I do international interview like this in English, and I know this is a subject. You know how censorship has been working. So
of course,
I have my doubts if this will remain. So I will download it before that, and also the Rumble backup I have there.
Cool.
Thanks very much again. Please stay alive. You're in a war zone. I want everybody to be aware of that. Because some people where I live, they might consider the way you talk about things very one-sided and very how do I say, not sometimes they might have think it not like very thoughtful, like an extremist or something. But the thing is that I am aware that you have been. I follow you since you've been there. I remember your weight changes because of the
Yeah.
Donbass diet and all that. And I know you've been many times close to death. So I respect your effort, and even if we did disagree on these things, I do respect the way that you put yourself on the line for what you believe in. And thank you.
That's what we should all do: is have enough information and understanding to know what the truth is, and then be willing to stand up and defend it. All right, bro. Listen, I'm gonna go. Let's keep in touch.
Yes. Thank you.
Remember, as goes Donbass,
as
so
goes the world. Yeah, so goes the world. Thank you.
Давай.
Давай. Ok. Pronto, e foi a entrevista com o Russel Bentley. Eu sei que, porque vivemos aqui num extremo oposto, que haverá no pensamento das pessoas que já viram, que estiveram a acompanhar, e de outras que irão ver, o pensamento de que isto poderá constituir de alguma forma uma peça de desinformação, porque são informações completamente contraditórias daquelas que vemos nas nossas notícias. Obviamente que se reserva, que temos que reservar, temos que ser céticos e ter dúvidas sobre tudo aquilo que ouvimos, mas não obstante, este é uma pessoa que está no terreno, e cujos relatórios, cujas informações que tem publicado nas suas redes, vieram a coincidir, por exemplo, com o trabalho de jornalistas ocidentais que também estão daquele lado. Eu quero reiterar que o Admira Livre Podcast não apoia qualquer agressão, nem de indivíduo para indivíduo, nem de Estado para Estado. Que fique bem claro esta situação. E obviamente que não tomamos nenhum lado, mas é preciso ter o máximo de informação e, sobretudo, somos contra a censura. Somos democráticos e aceitamos os argumentos opostos. Para aqueles que nos têm acompanhado, que não nos conheciam, muito obrigado. E os que nos conhecem e que viram e digam assim, olha, ele hoje, houve de certeza que houve alguém que pensou, olha, ele hoje, pronto, passou-se. Mas não, há de haver um dia destes. Agora temos andado muito em cima da questão da Ucrânia. Há de haver um dia destes que voltaremos a pôr os pés em Odmira, porque Odmira é a nossa origem, a ouvir as pessoas daqui. Eu sei que, porque tenho recebido algumas mensagens que dizem assim, agora andas aí um bocado a saltitar de um lado para o outro, a falar com pessoas que no fundo estão fora da esfera do território odmirense, mas a verdade é que nunca foi intenção do Odmira Livre Podcast estar confinado às fronteiras de Odmira. Existe todo um potencial na internet, não sei se estão a par disso, todo um potencial na internet que nos permite comunicar com o mundo todo, e hoje estivemos em direto de Donetsk. Quero também deixar claro que tentei contactar várias vezes o Bruno Amaral de Carvalho, que é o jornalista português que lá está, através do Facebook e do Instagram, e nunca obtive resposta. Vou continuar a tentar, porque gostava de ouvir da boca de um jornalista português. Também já tenho tentado contactar outros jornalistas ocidentais que lá estão. Não deve ser fácil. E pronto, é para dizer, é para dar um bocado de contas do trabalho e do que é que se pretende. E mais uma vez quero dizer que não pretendo glorificar nenhuma agressão de nenhum Estado a outro Estado, mas às vezes tenho a sensação que aquilo que os meios de comunicação social de referência passam não é a informação, vamos lá ver, para não dizer pior, não é a informação completa. Posto isto, despeço-me e uma boa noite e uma boa continuação para todos, e obrigado por assistirem ao Admira Livre Podcast. Agora vou passar o genérico, não passei no início porque estava a ver como é que as coisas corriam.
Admira Livre Podcast.